been?
Great. Yeah, I've been good. I've been really busy with a lot of travel basically over the last few
Mhm.
months, especially since the weather's picked up. Between about October and March, you can't really do anything here because it just rains all the time. But yeah, I've been
Sounds like
getting out.
Glasgow.
Yeah, very similar actually.
Yeah.
I think one of the comparisons I've made when people ask what the weather's like is between Scotland and the Pacific Northwest. Can be nice, but very very rainy and cloudy a lot of the time.
Yeah, it rains a lot here, a lot. Probably more than I
Yeah,
expected it to rain. And it's that light rain too. It's not even anything like Florida. Florida, it'll rain
yeah.
a good five,
You'll get
ten
a sort of
minutes.
you get a downpour and then it'll stop for a while.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and
yeah,
here
here it
it's
can just
like
go for 3 4 days.
I know, I'm just like, what in the world is going on, guys? How do you live here? Well, that's great. Yeah, how long have you been? You've been there for about what, 8 months?
A little bit longer now, but yeah, I moved in October last year. So yeah, 8.5 months, and we'll be here at least until probably next February. So I've kind of started to settle in now, get to know my way around the northwest, especially, but been trying to do some more traveling a bit further afield as well.
Where else are you trying to go?
Oh, so I've been down to Oregon, done some stuff in Portland and Eugene. Been over to Idaho. I spent a long weekend in a town called Sandpoint. And I've also, in the last few months, I have a girlfriend in Vancouver, up in British Columbia. So I'm up in Canada quite often. So recently, I've been sort of on Vancouver Island and doing a bit of traveling around the cities, particularly Vancouver and Victoria. So yeah, mostly the Northwest. I also went down to Las Vegas for a few days in March, so got to experience that, which is really cool. And this summer, I am doing a sort of train journey between Denver and Seattle. So I'll be going through the Southwest by train, and then up from California.
That has got to be expensive.
It's pretty cheap. Train travel here is quite affordable if you don't want to sleep a car. If
No,
you can deal
I
with
can't
it.
even believe that. It's usually the same price as a. Well, I don't know what's happened after COVID, but usually it's the same price as a plane. It's usually pretty
It's
ridiculous.
similar, but it's a
Yeah,
lot cheaper than driving. And if you want to see stuff at sort of ground level, and I quite enjoy train travel, as does my girlfriend who's coming with me. So that's
yeah.
kind of why we're doing it. It's a good excuse to sort of stop off in a few places along the way. So we're stopping in Salt Lake City, Reno, and the Bay Area. So good to see a few things along the way.
And I love train travels. It's like my favorite thing to do in the UK, but I just know in the
Yeah,
US, I just couldn't be bothered. I mean, I had a car. I mean, in
yeah,
Florida, it's not that accessible. I mean, it is. I've done it before, but it's like
mm.
okay. And then
Yeah,
a good tip for anyone who's interested in moving, not really to like the UK to the US or whatever, but just in general throughout the US. I didn't do it, but I really highly considered it. When moving, you can do Amtrak and you can put boxes
yes,
and furniture, and that was gonna
yeah,
save me so much money because I was trying to figure out how am I gonna move to
yeah.
like Arizona, and then suddenly I moved to Korea. So
Yes, yeah. I mean that you can't really do that by train, but it does. It is really quite cheap to do that if you're moving between two places that have train stations. Yeah, you definitely can. I think it's something like 42 cents per pound or something, which works out pretty good if you compare it to sort of getting people to move stuff by truck. I obviously haven't done that, but I do get around by train quite a lot. I'm lucky in that I live in Seattle, so we have fairly good public transit by
yeah,
comparison to a lot of the US. So I've got by so far without having to have a car. I did actually have my first driving lesson in the US yesterday.
really.
So I am kind of learning to drive, but that's more so that I can do things like rent cars to do road trips and get out of the city rather than just for day-to-day, use. I live in a fairly built-up area. I'm near light rail. I've got buses, so I can get around pretty well. I think actually, by comparison to where I lived in the UK, Seattle is pretty good, but it's that's rare. I mean, if you live anywhere outside a major city, it gets pretty rough fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, like I know in the UK, they tell me that as well. They're like, "Don't you always need a car?" And I'm like, "Yeah, unless you're in Chicago, New York, Seattle. Other than
Yeah,
that, I'm just like, yeah, you're driving. I wouldn't dare live in the U.S. without a car. You need something to get
yeah,
around. Unless you're just in one of those lucky cities where I don't know how long the bus takes you. I mean, you're kind of used to it, I guess. Being from Sheffield,
Yeah.
buses here in Glasgow are kind of shite. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't.
It really depends where you want to go and how quickly. I live a half-hour walk from downtown, so I'm not, I'm really in the urban core, and I think that does help. But even if I lived in one of the suburbs like Auburn or over in Bellevue or something, it wouldn't be very good at all. And
Really, I thought
that's
Belgium
just
would be okay. I mean, I know it's a very techie.
Bellevue's all right, but once you get sort of out of the city centre, it kind of
Gets
degenerates
bad.
into sort of rural uh,
Yeah.
King County fairly quickly. But yeah, it's it just you just have to get lucky, and it does mean that if you live somewhere like where I do, where you have access to all these things, you end up paying more in rent for it. So it's
Yeah.
just the trade off. But I save on not having a car, and I save quite a lot of money not having a car. So I think it works out okay for me, but not really for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you think about it, right? Because someone was just telling me how much they spend on like petrol here, and it was costing them about 40 quid. They just have a tiny little car, and I'm like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's probably costing me about. It would have cost me about 40 bucks had I stayed, because it was about. I don't know how much it is in Seattle, the gas, but in Florida it was about two something until
yeah.
like most recently, because of the war and everything, it's jumped to
Yeah.
four. So I know it would have cost me double. It would have cost me over like
Yeah,
40
it's around
bucks.
$5 a gallon here in Seattle. But I not that I ever really interact with it because I don't drive. But I
Yeah.
was when I was up in Canada, it's even more expensive. It's I can't remember how much it works out because they sell it in liters and it's a different currency, but it's maybe 25-30% more expensive up there. So
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, it's tricky. But I mean, the trade off if you live in and work in Seattle is that salaries are quite high. But I get
Mm.
paid in pounds because I'm mostly working for UK clients, and the exchange rate has sort of plummeted over the last few months. So that's hit my income
Oh.
fairly hard.
Oh wow, so you're working with UK clients still.
Well, I mainly kept on the ones I had because most of the work I can do remotely, and the
Right.
time zones are a bit of a challenge, but mostly it works. And I have a couple of American clients now, but mostly I've just sort of kept on my regulars because they still need the work and I still need them to pay me. So
Yeah.
that may change, but it's only 8 months in, so I'm still kind of doing the same job I was back home. But that's the beauty of remote working, I suppose.
Yeah, what was it you were doing exactly? You were doing sort of like graphic design, weren't you?
Yeah, mostly graphic design. I do a bit of writing work. I this is a very silly thing I did, but I did a long article ranking the logos of British local councils last autumn. And I've done a bit of a series of those where I look at logos of various categories of things. So I did one on British public transport, which actually is how I met my girlfriend.
Mm.
And I did one on British universities. And I've had a couple of commissions since then. One of which I'm allowed to talk about, which is property companies, one of which is we're still waiting to see that finalized. But though that's kind of been a bit of a sideline I've developed over the last few months. But mostly it's the design work and then a bit of writing stuff on the side. Yeah,
Nice, nice. That sounds pretty good. Sounds like a good deal.
yeah. And what are you doing these days?
I'm teaching for a company called Code Division. They
Cool.
teach a lot of like women's cohort group, so sort of like women who are trying to go back into the workplace. So I
Great.
teach Excel.
Oh, nice.
Last semester I was doing Power BI, so we just finished that class.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
soon they've got a contract to maybe for me to teach possibly some kids who are asylum seekers or like refugees or something
Oh,
like that.
brilliant.
So yeah,
Oh, very
it's a
good.
pretty good deal. I mean, I found it like within a week coming here. It was pretty wild. Um,
Yeah, yeah. That's great. I mean, that must be quite rewarding to see people sort of learning this stuff from scratch, and you by the end of it, you've given them a new skill.
yeah, yeah, no, it is pretty fun too, and it's work from home. Every once in a while, I can just go in the office and meet people. It's very flexible. So yeah, my
Yeah,
first
that's great.
UK job. That's pretty happened very
Amazing.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you done much travel around the UK since you moved?
Um, I've just because I've always gone back and forward between the UK. There's some places I guess I've already been to. I mean, I did go to my birth city. I was born in Greenock, Scotland,
Okay.
and so I
Right.
did
Wow.
cycle. I cycled all the way over there. That's about maybe 25-ish miles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I had to bike back to Glasgow. So overall, that day was about 60 miles
That's
practically.
a cool cycle though. You go out along the Clyde, right?
No, that one, yeah, actually, because I wish it was along the river, but yeah, you kind of go deep into like Glasgow a little bit, Um,
Okay.
yeah, and you're sort of going on the lamp. I've done that as well. I've cycled along the Clyde. I've gone to like Loch Lomond,
Mhm. Oh,
just
lovely.
done different canals, things like that. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
pretty cool ride. I quite enjoy it.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm fairly familiar with Scotland because my mum lives down in near Stranraer in the southwest, where the ferries to Northern Ireland go from.
Oh, okay.
So I usually, when I go see her, I stop off in Edinburgh and Glasgow, see some friends there, and I go down on the train. Yeah, over the last few years, I've kind of been getting familiar with Glasgow. Big fan.
Yeah, yeah, it's not bad. So, like, what made you go from Sheffield? Well, first off, I guess if anyone has been to Sheffield, they probably would know why. But yeah, what made you go from Sheffield to Seattle? Why
Well,
Seattle specifically too?
I actually really liked living in Sheffield. I think it was a very pleasant place to live. You could get by fairly easily on a bare minimum of effort. It was not that it was a horrible place, but it was getting a bit boring. I think I'd kind of done everything that there was to do there, and I'd been there for 8 years. And I had been in a sort of long term relationship that ended in 2019, and I basically decided I've got all these savings. I'm going to go on a holiday somewhere, and I basically picked. I was This was when Norwegian was still doing transatlantic flights very cheap, and I basically picked the furthest place I could go on Norwegian in America, and that was Seattle. And I came here for 2 weeks, and I just thought this is a really sort of cool and exciting and sort of laid back place to live. And so I basically decided to do that. And the move was delayed by a couple of years because of COVID and stuff. And I was just waiting around to save up money to do it. Um, but beyond that, I mean, there was never really much doubt in my mind that this was where I wanted to come, this part of the world, particularly the Pacific Northwest. And so I ended up here, and I think it's been a really good decision. I think it's just one of those places where you just keep turning a corner and thinking, "Wow, look at that!"
Yeah,
And having sort of a city that has kind of mountains on both sides and similar amount of hills to Sheffield, which is unfortunate, but means you do get some nice views, and we're surrounded by water and stuff. It's a really really cool place to be. It is possible that I'll be moving to Vancouver maybe in the next year or so, but that is basically the same thing where you've got this really amazing views and this amazing landscape and access to nature, and but you've also got all the modern amenities of a big city and really exciting place to be. So I just think that it was the right time to leave Sheffield. I think I'd done everything there. It's kind of a shame because there were lots of things that were there that I really liked, a lot of friends, but it felt like the right time to find a new opportunity.
yeah. No, my friend, she's from Sheffield. Actually, she nipped over to America for a little bit, saw some friends. She's down in Mexico now. I think she's gonna go down to like Central America and eventually,
Cool.
I think it's one of the Caribbean islands. I just can't think of it right now. Where she's gonna like
Mm.
help maybe build schools or something like that, or find a job really. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean Sheffield, it's nice, it's cheap, so it's a lovely city, but yeah, I can imagine if you're a young person or if you didn't have like a family already,
yeah.
or it's just kind of like
It
wow, that's
definitely has
yeah.
this gap where you get a lot of people who come as students and they stay for maybe their first job, and
Mhm.
then you don't really have a lot of people in their sort of mid 20s to the sort of late 30s. Then you got a lot of people who come back when they start a family. But
Yeah,
if you, when I was sort of 25, 26, it was not a good place to sort of meet new people or find activities I wanted to do, just because there wasn't the kind of social base to sustain that. Whereas now, I live in a neighborhood that's full of people in their 20s and 30s, and there's just so much more kind of going on for younger
right.
people in Seattle, which I think is a shame because I think Sheffield has a lot to recommend it. And if it had that, then maybe I'd have stayed. But I've always said it's one of those places that's really quite nice to live in, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for a holiday.
Yeah,
And I think that is about the size of it.
yeah, yeah. No, nice city. Yeah, so I just went there for really just a few hours, and we practically, I
Mm.
felt like we walked the whole town. We just
Yeah,
walked
yeah,
around, and that was it. I was like, that's Sheffield. I mean, I'd go back if to visit friends, stuff like that. But yeah, but living there,
yeah.
I'm not too sure about that even for myself, really.
Mm.
Well, that's great. That you went to Seattle. You just picked a spot. So
Yeah, basically. And when with Glasgow, I guess is that because you were born there and you felt some kind of affinity to it, or what was the reasoning behind that?
yeah, with Greenock, I guess I felt I did want to like kind of learn a little bit more about my birth city. But and I've asked a few British people this because I wanted to come here and do my art, and so it would make more sense to probably go to Birmingham where my family is from.
Mhm.
Problem is Birmingham just seems so industrial. It just doesn't
Yeah,
seem like a very artsy city. Oddly enough, though, being in Glasgow, I feel like it's not that much of an artsy city. It's great for music. If you love
yeah,
that grassroots music, Glasgow is wonderful. But it's interesting because I just recently had a chat with someone who was originally from South Africa. He's
yeah,
an artist up here, and he was just saying, I was just telling him I have a hard time finding the artists. Where are they? And he's like, yeah, it's very closed off. It's very institutionalized. It's a very tight knit group of people, and they almost don't go beyond that. I still think there's plenty of opportunities, plenty of different markets, and that was one reason why I came because if you ever go to like a market and let's say I'm pretty sure you've seen them already, Seattle. When
hmm
people have got their 10 by 10 tents, wherever that is in metrics, I have no idea. Um,
yeah,
you buy basically the plot of land.
hmm
And then you've got to bring everything. You've got to bring the tents, tables, chairs, everything to set up shop. Whereas here, when I found out, like most of the markets, even in England, you pay and they give you everything. You just have to bring your art. I'm like, that's
yeah,
brilliant. That's
yeah,
fantastic. You know what I mean? And even though the guy was telling me that most of his clients were in England and in Wales and stuff like that, the good thing about the
hmm
UK is that transportation is just amazing. And it's also just a much smaller country. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can fit the UK like right over
yeah,
Florida. It's so small. I
yeah.
mean, well, probably not
It's
Florida,
I
but
think it's almost exactly the same size as Florida for
is
square
it?
miles. Yeah,
Yeah, isn't it? It's
yeah.
it's it's not
And
big.
no, Washington State is bigger, and it's weird to consider that when I sort of talk to friends back home. And I had a friend who's coming over next week and asked me if we could get the train down to San Francisco and back. And I was like, well, you can, but it's going to take you 24 hours each way. Yeah, definitely the ability to get around really easily is something I definitely miss about home.
Yeah, I mean, just to give people an idea, if they're, like I can be in Birmingham in 4 hours by train. That's just a regular
Yeah,
slow train. I know they're trying to bring they talked about bringing the high speed train for London and Birmingham,
yeah,
basically that whole
yeah,
line. I don't know if it's going to happen or if it's been delayed because of
yeah.
COVID, but
hmm
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you're working with. And the good thing about the train is, take on as much luggage as you want. So if I have a bunch of arts
Yeah,
things, people just been taking their suitcases and just go. Why
yeah.
not? So I'm just like,
It
yeah,
does make it a lot easier. Yeah, I mean, 4 hours on a train here gets me to Portland, and
yeah,
Portland's pretty cool, but it's all I can do really. Or when the trains were running, I could get to Vancouver in 4 hours, but they've not been running for 2 years. So yeah, it's as someone who likes to ride around on trains, it's not been the best place to move. But that's the trade off you make.
yeah, yeah. And it's sort of the same thing as you were mentioning earlier. It's like I wasn't in any relationship, not married,
Yeah,
no kids. It's like I might as
no,
well do it now before.
the easiest time to do it because you never know something might happen, and then it becomes a lot harder if you've got other ties. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I didn't really have any debt. I mean, Biden has delayed our student loan debts for the past
Mm.
basically almost 2 years. It's just been
Yeah,
on hold. I'm just waiting for him to be like, all right, just cancel it, and like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
off the hook. So yeah, that's just
And
really
something
it.
that I have to sort of work out is,
Bit choppy there.
mm,
Yeah. What did you have to work out?
yeah. Oh, so I have to work out my taxes and stuff because the way student loans are calculated in the UK is basically it's an extra tax rate that gets added onto your taxes. But obviously, because I'm living here, I'm paying US taxes, so most of it should get written off as part of that. But I don't
Mm.
really know how the student loan component works. So basically, I'm just waiting for HMRC to tell me, and then I'll find out how much I owe. But hoping that they sort of don't catch up with me because I did work out that basically I'm not ever going to pay off my student loans because the you know
Right. People in the
they
UK
get
say
written off
that
automatically after 30 years, and then the amount that I'd have to earn to actually pay them back is so high that it's not really ever going to happen. So, but we'll
because it's
see.
more like a tax for you guys, isn't it? It's not really like it's not like a
Yeah,
mortgage like
effectively,
how we
there
have
is
it.
there is a figure for what you owe, but it doesn't. Yeah, you're not. There's not sort of. It's paid back as part of your tax rate, so it's 9% on earnings over £25,000 a year or something. So
Right.
that the good side of that is that it means you don't have fixed payments you've got to make, and if you're not earning enough, you don't have to pay it. But on the other hand, it means that it has a high interest rate, and you basically it's a graduate tax forever. You're not. Most people aren't reasonably going to pay it back.
Right.
So it's a different kind of world.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different system. Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah. So were there any well, what about you? Were there any since so we both sort of have the same background where well, I was actually born in Scotland. You know, most of my
Yep.
family's from the UK, but my dad was in the Navy, and we've traveled. I can't remember if you said your dad was also in the military as well.
No, he wasn't. No, he moved
Okay.
here. He moved to the UK in 1990. He was a sort of artist and musician in Denver for a long time, and
Mm,
he basically just got bored of living in the States and came here a couple of years before he moved and decided he liked it. Well, came to the UK a couple of years before he moved and decided he liked it and
mm,
ended up staying. And still is living down in Leicestershire. But yeah, so I was born in the UK, grew up there.
right.
Really have never really felt American. I have the citizenship, but it's not where I grew up. It's not where I spent a huge amount of time prior to last year. So it's all been very new. And although I've got the passport, I very much, people here think of me as British, and I think probably always will. Just a different way of living and thinking, and
Mm,
it's hard to escape that world you're raised in. Might be different for you having had British family and having been raised overseas. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's unfortunate because I've even though I've lived in many different countries, Florida was the one that I guess I've stayed the longest just because that's where, my dad retired and that's just where I
yeah,
was. So I get the tag American, but I'm just like it's still strange. Like it's still even when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, what do you want? Because usually the problem is I just tell people Florida, they just assume from Florida. And then a year
yeah,
later they'll be like, "Well, how come you didn't tell us you were born in Scotland?" I'm like, "You didn't ask that question exactly."
yeah,
It's a bit complicated once you break it down. It's like, "Well, yeah, I was born in Scotland, but family's from Birmingham. They're all Jamaican." It's just like, and the
yeah.
the the identities get a bit strange, right? Like, people
Us do,
expect
yeah,
me to say soccer, and I'm like, "Guys, I first lived in Europe before I lived in America, though. Like, I've always said
yeah,
football. It's always been football. So some things I can be a bit British about, and then some things I guess I can be American about. And some things I'm just in the middle. Like I still didn't really realize that Americans say line and British people say Q. Like I
yeah,
knew they said it, but I didn't think that was really a thing. I was just like, "What are you guys talking about?" Like everyone goes in the line, everyone goes in the queue, and they're like, "No,
yeah.
Americans say line." I'm like, "Really? Really?"
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
something I've
yeah,
had to learn, and I occasionally get Americans looking at me funny when I say certain things.
yeah.
My housemate came downstairs the other day wearing her sort of running gear, and I knew she was going for a run. So I said, are you off out?" And she just looked at me like I was an alien because she'd never heard that phrase before. Um, and when reciting things over the phone, I still say Z and get
Yeah.
people looking at me funny because I don't say Z. So it's yeah, it's an interesting one. But I think most people are. I do think there's a stereotype about Americans that they're not very curious about the rest of the world. I think that's true to an extent, but actually, most people, when they find out I'm from the UK, actually have a lot of questions, and they're quite curious. And I think the people have been very kind about finding out more about me
Mm.
and my country. I think it's one of those countries where Americans kind of have a bit of a fascination with the UK.
Well, I think it's
But
also the state that you're in. You're in Seattle, creative people,
yeah.
um, people with a little bit more of a education. I feel like they're not gonna feel that way in the South.
Well, yeah. I mean, I haven't been to the south, but I did go to. I did spend a long weekend in Idaho, in a sort of small town, and
Yeah, you're right.
just ended up hanging out in a bar, and they were actually very curious. I think there was an element of "What the hell are you doing here?"
Right.
To it, but I think it was hopefully educational for them. It was for me. It's not somewhere I'd ever spent time before, and I think the good thing about the States is that there's so much of it. It's so huge that you can usually find something new to see, even if you've been here quite a while.
Yeah, that is sort of the downside to living in America. It's I've had discussions with a few people here saying like it just feels sort of closed off in a way.
Mm,
They're just so far away from each other, and then on top of their
Yeah.
mindset. It's like, all right, where are they gonna go? Canada,
Yeah.
Mexico. I mean, they're
And
just
even a lot of them
yeah,
don't go to those. I mean, I've
yeah,
met lots of people in Seattle, or even in Bellingham, which is maybe 30 miles from the Canadian border, and they've never been. I say I'm going to Vancouver this weekend, and they're like, "Wow, I've always meant to go." I'm like, well, it's a two and a
to
half hour drive.
yeah,
It's you can go there very easily. But most Americans don't have a passport, and I think if you ever look at you look at the geography of it, if you live in Missouri or something, you're so far from any other country that you probably don't need to bother. And I think because it's such a big country, you can kind of get everything you might want, climate and geography wise, in the States. You can visit deserts, you can go to forests, you can go to the beach, you can go to big cities, you can go to small towns. It's all there, in a way that if you want to go somewhere really hot, well, you can't do that in the UK. Best you can
yeah,
do is go to Cornwall, and it doesn't get that warm there. So you have to fly to Spain, or you go to the south of France. Whereas Americans, you can go to San Diego, you can go to Miami.
you get the snowbirds. That's what they call them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I imagine it's the same the other way around. If you're from the south, or you're from the southwest and you want to go hiking in mountains, you can go to the Rockies, you can go up here, you can go to the Cascades, and you don't need to go to Switzerland for a skiing holiday,
right.
which British people would. So yeah, it's I guess I think it's probably not that healthy for them, but you can sort of see why it happens.
Yeah, no, I can totally see why it happens. Yeah, it's sort of just the geography and just also like the mentality. Yeah, it's like like where else would they go? Yeah, it's a bit
Yeah,
different. Yeah, like I said, America's so big that it's just like, oh
yeah,
my goodness, how am I gonna make it to these, right? Like these art shows. Like once you want to get into like the really big shows and you find out there are all these different states, it's like, how am
yeah,
I gonna get there, man? It's too much
yeah.
money. I mean, even one
You
to go
can't, you
to
can't, yeah, you can't take all that stuff on a plane. And if you want to drive, it's going to take you 3 days. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a difficult decision.
it's different. Yeah, definitely difficult. We also have the same sort of culture shocks. Well, I guess the first one I remember when I read your article on Medium, you didn't like how people were saying your name. As I found out the same thing coming to Glasgow.
Yeah,
I've been getting called Shan. I'm just
yeah,
like, no, no, you're off just by a little bit. It's just Sean, and I'm like
yeah.
Shan. I'm like, oh darn it,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's which is strange because it is a British name. I suppose if you're in Wales, people would get it because it's a Welsh name. But
People in Wales get,
yeah,
people in England get, people in Scotland Shan, and I'm like, what?
yeah,
you know, Same as for you, the whole Robin,
it's
Robin.
the O sound.
It's
It's
the
the O
O.
sound. So we
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because you're. I
because
was like,
Americans
oh
say it
yeah,
like
you
a
would
Robin.
say Robin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's a bit strong
I've
here.
just had to. I've just sort of had to get used to it. I get to the point where people will sort of guess it wrong 3 times in a row. I'll say, "Yeah, that's fine. I'm Robert." Um, that happened to me the other day, but it was yes, it was from someone who was very drunk. So it wasn't in the I didn't think correcting them was going to get me much. So
Yeah,
it's it's just a continuing problem. And to be fair, he was Canadian rather than American, but they're very similar. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it has been strange. And I think one thing that I mean is maybe less of a factor now because people aren't wearing masks so much. But one thing I really found was that when I was having conversations with someone where both of us were wearing masks, that was difficult because you rely so much on being able to see someone's lips move,
hmm
and if they're talking quickly, actually it can become quite difficult. Um, Another thing I've also found is that a lot of people who speak good English, but the English isn't their first language.
Mm,
Because they're used to hearing American English and speaking American English,
right.
there's an extra challenge there. So people who are from, met a couple of people from Korea or from Mexico, and because they've got very good English, but they're just used to hearing Americans speak, they get
Right.
completely thrown off by my accent.
Yeah, I when I went to Korea, yeah, they do love the American English. They love American culture as well. And funny
Mm.
enough, the person that I replaced at my school was actually British English. So, and not that he taught too much of it, but I remember one time we were teaching the word sweater, and then this one student just
Yes.
goes, "Teacher, can we say jumper?" I'm like, "Where did you learn that?" Like who
Yeah.
taught you that? So, yeah,
Yeah, that's another one that I keep saying without meaning to. And I think most Americans get it by context. They understand what jumper is, but yeah, there's a bunch of weird ones. Like one that my American friends were really amused by was dodgems instead of bumper cars. Um, which
Belgians. I've never even heard that.
Yeah, dodgem is the British term for a bumper car.
Oh,
Um, which I guess is self-explanatory, but
Yeah.
it's one of those that you don't really think about because it doesn't come up very much.
I
But
guess
when
bumper
you hear
cars
it,
makes more sense to me because you bump into them.
the intention isn't really to dodge them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny one. Yeah, I've been right different I've been like hanging out with a bunch of Scottish people, and sometimes that Glaswegian, accent
Yeah.
is like one time my pal said, oh, this one guy had a bird. I was like, oh, he had a pet bird. He's like, no, a woman. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's just all the different little slangs, right? I mean, that's things that my parents don't teach me. I mean, even though they grew up in the UK, they never used any slang around me, so I don't know any.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even like famous people. Like I was reading a book about being a third culture kid,
Mm.
and I just read it, and it was the same issue where these British parents, they've neglected to tell their kid, who I think his name is Guy Fawkes.
Oh, right. Yeah. Guy Fawkes.
I
Yeah.
but here I am in my 30s. I'm like, who is that? And they're just like,
Yeah. And
I
you'll
didn't
run
have a
into that in
clue.
November, I guess. That's quite a big holiday. It's sort of it's not really our Thanksgiving. It's its own thing. It's hard to explain. But
Yeah.
you should definitely, yeah, if this is going to be your first bonfire night, then definitely go along and see something, because
Well,
it's
I
a
don't
very
know if we'll
strange.
be up here in Scotland, but
True. Well, it's true, but it might find something.
but
Um, yeah, I got my first 4th of July in a couple of weeks.
oh yeah, that's coming up pretty soon.
But that's going to be fun. Yeah, I've got a couple of friends who recommended some places to go and watch the fireworks and stuff. But yeah, that's all very new.
Have you been getting the whole, because when I tell people I'm British, then I get Americans to like, oh, we won the war kind of a thing. So have you been
Um,
getting that?
it doesn't come up very much. I think it might do as it approaches.
Probably.
But yeah, I like to point out we won the War of 1812, so we can have that.
Yeah.
But really, the reality is nobody actually cares.
Yeah, I'm
But
pretty sure.
it's a fun.
Again, it could be more of a north south. I mean, I think I get Southerners who just sometimes say the strangest thing once they find out I'm British. I'm just like, okay, very
Hmm.
strange
Sorry, I lost you slightly
stereotypes.
there.
Huh?
Yeah, I lost you
Yeah.
slightly there, but I think I picked up what you were saying. But yeah, it's. I think it maybe it's just the amount of contact you have with other people. Although that having been said, I've met very few other British people in Seattle.
Really?
Maybe 5 or 6. Whereas up in Vancouver, there's thousands. It's. I was with my girlfriend the other day. We were in a bar, and there were some British people at the other table, and I was like, "Oh, Anna, there's Brits," and she's like, "Yeah, it's Canada. There's lots of them here." And
Yeah.
whereas here, like, if I ever hear British people in the bar, like, I go over and make conversation because it's just so rare that I run into any of them that I'm like, got to find people who have the same background. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's almost coming commonplace actually to hear maybe an American. It's very diverse here in
yeah,
Glasgow. It's pretty wild,
yeah,
and
it is
American
as
accents
as
stick out
Scotland
like a
goes.
sore thumb too. Of all the accents, that's a
Yeah.
very strong one usually if you hear it.
Yeah, it does stand out, and I very rarely met any Americans in Sheffield, maybe 2 or 3, most of whom were students at the university,
Mm.
and it's I think something like half of the Americans in Britain are in London, which doesn't surprise me hugely,
Yeah,
and a lot of the others are sort of academics. They work in university towns and so on, but my dad is something of the exception,
yeah,
but. I think British people here are largely in New York and LA, which I think guess makes sense because a lot of them work in either financial sector or the entertainment industry,
yeah.
which I guess that's where you go. But or they're in the military.
All right.
And so over here, yeah, we don't get a huge amount. In fact, there's a weird history of antipathy to British people in Seattle. Cricket is still banned in Seattle's parks because in the 20s they banned it as a sort of they were worried about sort of cultural influence from Canadians and people from coming down from BC. So they ended up banning cricket. There's also, if you ever go to places like, there's an armory in downtown Seattle, which is now like a cultural center, but used to be a military armory. And there's a fort in Tacoma. And both of them have plaques that are like, this was built to defend against the Royal Navy base in Victoria, which is up in British Columbia,
Mm.
and it's just really fascinating how there was still this sort of cultural antipathy right up until probably the 30s and 40s. It's very strange.
Yeah, that is a very interesting one. I would have never have thought cricket is
No.
banned in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, I think in practice, if I was to take a cricket ball and a bat down to the local park, nobody would care.
Yeah,
But yeah, legally, it was never repealed.
that's very interesting. I like that one. And we also shared another culture shock. Our duvets. They're called now.
Yes,
You know they're called comforters in America, but
they're slightly different. So a comforter is like a contained thing. You can't remove the cover from it. You just have to
right.
wash the whole thing. Whereas a duvet, you have a removable cover that you take off and wash, and you can change them out.
It,
And replacing the covers is a massive pain.
right.
But it's one of the things I particularly enjoyed is having comforters because I don't have to change the duvet cover. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of my favorite innovations actually. That and yeah.
Yeah. No. So before getting here, what I did was I ordered stuff from IKEA because I found out there was an IKEA
Mhm.
in Glasgow, and I was like, oh,
Yeah,
I'll
there
order
is.
it to the flat that I'm going to. But it was cool because there was an IKEA in Jacksonville. So what I did was I went around the one in Jacksonville. I was like, oh yeah, I'll take
Ah,
that. Oh yeah, that mattresses are pretty affordable in IKEA, I think. So
yeah.
I got all this stuff from IKEA, and I just made sure I bought it from the Glasgow website and got it
Mm,
shipped. But
it's
my
very good.
flatmate,
Yeah.
before coming, she just asked me, "Have you got a duvet?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've got one. I bought one." And then I get there and I open it up. I'm like, "Why is it just sheets?" It's funny because of all the times I've always visited my family in the UK. I didn't actually have to do UK things. I mean, yeah, I would take the
No.
train and interact with people, eat, stuff like that. I did things on a very surface level, almost like a tourist, but
Mhm.
then I didn't actually ever have to like get a bank account. This
Yeah.
is my first bank. I've never had to like, have a duvet. And I'm like, guys, like, why don't you just sew it in? And I get the same strange question. British people are like, how do you wash your comforter at home? I'm like, toss the whole thing in. Why would I
Yeah.
take it out? You
I
know?
think it's that because British people live in smaller houses, they don't have as big washing machines, so you can't as easily throw the whole thing in. It becomes awkward, so they end up.
Ah, that
They've
could
found a
be it.
solution where you don't have to do it, and the dryers aren't as powerful back home. I seem to recall.
Yeah, that's the thing. Most people don't
Um,
have a dryer in the
yeah, they
UK.
certainly don't have a separate dryer. They'll have a washer dryer maybe, but yeah, sometimes not even that. So it's yeah, that has been different. I've noticed that. Certain things like banking here are just really antiquated and backwards compared to what they are back home.
It's always
Like
been
it
that way.
taking 3 days to transfer money, and we've only just got to the point where most places take contactless payments.
Hmm.
Whereas back home, we've been using them for 5, 6 years, and
No,
you can transfer money basically instantly.
yeah, UK banking has always been our, and it's probably just the rest of the world really that it's been quite advanced. I mean, yeah, as you said, only recently on my Navy Federal account, it's had contactless, and even then half the time it doesn't work.
Mm,
It's like, well, what's the point, guys?
yeah,
Yeah, no, it is quite advanced, and I think people are just gonna really skip past it, to be honest with you, because I'm seeing more people paying with their phones in the U.S. than anything else. Yeah,
yeah,
you've got
yeah,
things like Cash App now and Venmo, which don't really exist
yeah.
here, but I feel like they don't exist here because sending
They don't
money.
really need to.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like you have a sort code and you just send money to
Mm,
people. And right there, I've gotten the question asked to me, how would you give money to someone in the U.S.? I'm like, go get cash. Like
yeah, yeah.
pull out cash. It's
Or
not a thing.
or wait 3 days for the payment to go through. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Or write them a check. I've had to write a check to get my passport renewed. It's the first time I've ever had to do that in my life. So
yeah, go get a cashier's check.
yeah, yeah.
Are you
It's the
still?
only time I've.
But you got a U.S. though
Go
bank,
ahead.
right?
Yeah, that's right. So I have a Bank of America account. I have a Seattle Credit Union savings account. So I've got into the system now. But it
Ooh.
did take me a while. I had like a multi-currency account for a while, which I was using,
Mm.
and that was fine. And it still is useful if I'm because I do a lot of travel to Canada. I can sort of change money easily into Canadian dollars and use that. But yeah, I've tried to because part of the problem I had was that I had my credit rating just didn't work here because they're not using the same credit rating agencies. And
Mm.
so because I was American, but I'd not lived here for 26 years, I just wasn't in the system. So
Mm.
anything like getting a credit card and stuff, I found really hard. And doing approval for renting and things. So I've ended up having to just pay loads of extra deposits and stuff just to get in the system so I can actually have a credit rating. And it's one thing you don't really realize if you're just growing up, because you just accumulate stuff as you go. But if you come here without one, it can really get in your way.
Yeah, it was sort of the same for me. Getting the bank wasn't too difficult.
Hmm.
Luckily, I was able just to get a letter from my bank saying that I've moved. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
one of those things where it's like now I've got to think about my credit score. Now I've got to think about getting a phone bill, like a proper phone bill. I just do like a month to month because why not?
yeah,
I didn't need anything complicated. But I was like, oh, now I probably need to get like a contract, things like that.
yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of things that you don't think about, and it's like, well, now I've got to take some time to sort of build up some sort of credit.
Yeah, it's I don't know why it has to be so complicated. I don't know why I couldn't just transfer internationally. I mean, the rent I paid in the UK is as good as the rent I pay over here, But
Yeah,
that's international regulatory systems for you, I suppose. But
yeah, definitely.
yeah, it's yeah, but I think I'm getting used to it. I think because I haven't been back home since I moved, and I will be in September.
Mm.
And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what things I notice about the UK, having been away for a while, that I didn't notice when I was there, or I took for granted while I was there.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes I notice as an adult the strangest things I just never really thought about. Like in Birmingham, we've got a lot of subways, just those
Yeah,
passageways that you just go under the road.
underpasses. Yeah,
I actually never knew what it was called. I never even bothered to
yeah,
figure it out. It wasn't until like I properly listened to like the Craig David song 7 Days that he says he's
mm.
going to a subway, but I was like, there's no train. I'm like, then I realized in Birmingham, like the sign says subway. I was like, oh, really?
Yeah,
I just never actually thought
yeah.
about
That's
it,
something
never looked.
you wouldn't pick up.
Yeah, I did. I just didn't really think about certain things. Yeah, you're right. There's certain things where like again, just because I've always sort of like touched and go and came back and see my family, then leave for a different country. Some
Mm.
things I just sort of like I just saw them at the surface, but then just never bothered to like ask the question. Like my cousin for the
Yeah.
longest time worked for the council, but I never actually thought about what that was. I was like, then
Hmm.
it's like I get here and I'm like, well, what is a council tax? It's like
Yeah.
never actually had to pay one or even consider it. So
Yeah.
yeah, things like that are interesting, and it's interesting. Like when you watch maybe I watch maybe American TV with my friends, I'll
Hmm.
go like, oh yeah, you probably didn't get that joke because you guys don't have Panera. You know,
Yeah.
things like that, little things, little quirky things, anything that probably irritates you in the US, like just every time you're never gonna get used to it.
Um, there's things like there are little things that bother me occasionally. One is that when you get coffee from a cafe, it's really slow, and it took me ages to figure out why. Because I was like, well, it can't be that every cafe just has terrible baristas or whatever, because that wouldn't make any sense. You'd have to get somewhere they're good, but it just takes so much longer if you want to get a latte or something. And I finally figured out why. It's because the voltage is lower. So if you need to heat milk
Yeah.
or you need to boil anything, it takes twice as long.
Mm.
Actually, when I moved here, I bought a kettle to make tea and stuff, and I got my friend to sort of time how long it takes to boil a liter of water, and I did the same, and it was twice as long because the voltage is half what it is. But so that was one thing. Another thing is pedestrian crossing the street. Lights take a lot longer to change. You're waiting for traffic for a lot longer. I mean, getting around as a pedestrian in general is a lot worse over here because the pavements, sidewalks aren't as well maintained. There's often not as many of them. It can often be quite. The grid system works really well if you're driving, but if you're on foot, it often means that if you want to cross two roads at once, you have to do two pedestrian crossings, and it can take ages.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I found. Some things are just confusingly expensive. So fresh fruit and vegetables over here, really, really pricey. I'm not sure if that's the case in Florida because I imagine a lot more is grown down there. But I think transport costs add a lot in Seattle
Mm.
compared to what it was like back home. and stuff like spices are just outrageously expensive if you want to buy them in a supermarket, like
Really?
$10 for like a thing of cinnamon, whereas it would be maybe like a pound 25 in a British supermarket. And obviously you can get around that a bit if you go to like an Asian supermarket, buy it in bulk, that sort of thing, but it's still, little things end up sort of adding up quite a lot.
Yeah, groceries here are cheap. I'm not gonna lie to you. They're
Mm.
they're they're pretty affordable, and even then, I go so dirt cheap. I wait for the tag to go out the day of, so it's
Yeah,
75
yeah,
off.
yeah,
So I've got like this many sausage rolls in my fridge right now that I need to
yeah.
hurry up and
You
cook.
just
Yeah,
Yes,
I think for me, and it's always been that way as a kid, and I think it's just never going away. Things closing at 5 p.m. I can't wrap
yeah,
my brain around that one. I hate it. I've never liked it. Even when like visiting my family, I'm just like, and it's funny because I'll have other friends like, why would you want a super drug? Which if anyone doesn't know super drug, it's
mm,
just like a pharmacy. But why would you want that open at past 5? I'm like, you kidding me? I've gone to CVS at like midnight. That's
yeah.
like
Sometimes you need
that's
painkillers
yeah,
or a hairbrush or something. Yeah,
yeah,
and it is weird. One thing that I did find living back home that is a little bit better here, but it's still not amazing. Is just cafes and things. Never, there's nothing that opens late. Like I was once in, and it's okay if you want to have a drink or something, you get a pub. But I was working in central London once and staying with some friends who I didn't have a spare key, so I had to wait till they were home to get into their flat, and they weren't going to be home till like 9 or 10. And I finished work at 6, and so I was in Victoria, so central London, and I just couldn't find anywhere. I couldn't find any sort of cafe that was open past 6, and eventually I ended up, like, I think, going to Five Guys and just sitting in there and using the free Wi-Fi and eating a burger. But it was a bizarre thing to be in one of the world's biggest cities.
yeah.
And just not be able to find a late night cafe or anything. Now, I'm sure I could have found one if I'd looked around. There probably would have been someone somewhere, but it's a weird gap in the British psyche, which just doesn't do evenings. Whereas here, like if I go out in Capitol Hill where I live, I can just everything's open till like midnight.
Yeah, I'm used to the I was like, I'm not satisfied until a shop closes at like, midnight. I'm used to
Mm,
like Walmart being open 24 hours.
yeah,
Yeah, that's just one thing that like every time, I mean, for a good while, that was really just like, ugh, like it's the shops are closed at 5. Like go hurry up, and I just don't know how people do it even with work. I'm like, you get off like 4:30 or 5. Like, what are you? How do you do that? Like, it's just to me, it just rattles my brain. I'm like, I
yeah,
need like 10 p.m. at least. I need 9, 10 p.m. store closing
yeah.
hour.
Until about 2005, I don't think it was legal for pubs to open past 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
It was sort of a leftover wartime restriction that they only repealed a few years ago. So even like the nightlife was quite curtailed until fairly recently.
Yeah, I mean, it would surprise people. Like, I would tell them, like, man, like last drinks in the US is like 2, 2 o'clock
Yeah,
in the
two is
morning.
two
It's
is none.
like,
Yeah, one gap that I have found actually is that the space occupied by the pub in British social life doesn't really exist here. So there's bars if you want to go out drinking, or there's sort of cafes if you don't want to drink at all. But what there isn't in the US is a kind of intermediate space where you can kind of go and like have a pint and read a newspaper or something like that.
mm,
Um, I think part of that is probably that so many people drive that casual drinking can't really happen because you're either going out to drink, in which case you're going to get a cab home, or you've got a designated driver, or you're not going to drink at all. So that
or
kind of
you're gonna
middle
drink and
spot.
drive.
Yeah, which actually a lot of people do here, which I
Right.
do find a bit. Yeah, I've been out to bars with friends of mine who I won't name, who basically said like, "Yeah, I'll drive you home." And I'm like, "Sure, I can get the bus." And they're like, "No, no, we'll just wait until I sober up." And I'm like, "Don't really feel
Yeah,
great
I
about
mean,
that."
I'm really surprised because here they said it's so. I don't know about England, but they said it's so strict in Glasgow. Like, they're like, yeah, no, like even if you probably have one drink, it's technically over the legal limit. And
Yeah, I think it's the same rules, but it might be more harshly enforced in Glasgow because Scotland does have notoriously drinking
yeah,
problems.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I thought that was crazy as well. And they've asked me the
mm,
same question. If you're going out drinking in America, like, how do you get home? I'm like, drive. How else am
yeah,
I gonna get home? Cab is way too
yeah,
expensive. You know?
Yeah, and again, I'm lucky in that I'm somewhere which has late night buses, so I can do that. But I either drink within walking distance of home, or I have to get a cab, and that doesn't always work out very cheap.
Yeah.
One thing that I didn't realize when I moved here was that the measures for spirits are different. So I often drink sort of whiskey or rum if I go out for drink, and back home, a measure is 25 milliliters, and here it's 44.
Mm.
So when I first went out drinking in the States, I basically had what I assumed was a normal amount that I'd go out and have a drink, but I was actually having almost twice as much, and I just completely trashed, and like dropped my phone getting home, broke the screen. It was terrible.
Yeah.
But you learn fairly quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something I'm used to as well. The different sort of conversion sizes. I don't know them off the
Mm,
top of my head. Like, yeah, if you say liters or anything metric,
yeah.
I'm just like,
I started
yeah,
to sort of learn my way around the sort of imperial stuff because we use a bit of it in the UK. So like you measure people in feet and inches, and stuff like that, and
mm,
distances in miles. That's still the same. But
yeah,
when I was in Canada for the last week, it's all metric. So they measure the stuff in kilometers and speed in kilometers per hour. So when I got back to America, when I was on the bus coming back to Seattle, I was really confused because I was looking at the signs on the highway and being like, it says 70. Why are we going so fast?
yeah,
So I was thinking in kilometers per hour.
yeah,
And yeah, it does really throw you if you're not used to it. Particularly like really precise measurements. They don't have, because you can't do things in like millimeters. So anything that needs to be really precise, I don't know how they do that. You have to do it in fractions of an inch. But I'm not an engineer, so it's not something I interact with very often. But I'm led to believe that's an issue.
yeah, yeah. It's not a big issue for me here. It's just more like I'm like, guys, unfortunately, I only know this in inches, so good luck. There's some
Yeah,
things I'm just
yeah,
yeah, but it's just taking a while, especially time. Time's also a big thing. People say, half this or quarter till
yeah.
five
I
past, and I
was
and I can't do it. My brain's just like, what? What's the time? Let me just convert it real quick in my brain.
Yeah, I did. That was another one I didn't realize. Like, I was talking to someone in a bar, and they asked me the time, and I said, "Oh, it's 8:45," and they laughed at me. And I hadn't realized that wasn't a normal way to say 8:45.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah,
it's
I
yeah,
think quite a lot of people who I've met here who probably have just never left Europe. I think maybe they would be a bit taken aback, even though they get to watch like American TV and
mm,
stuff like that. And you kind of see it on the surface level. Yeah, it's once you're there that it kind of really hits you like, oh, you really do this. You know what I mean? There's
yeah.
no. It's like,
Um,
oh.
One thing that I quite liked actually when I arrived here was the yellow school buses,
Yeah,
which they really do. It's one of those things that's like a stereotype of America, just based on TV and stuff, because that's been the only place we ever see them. Because I had a school bus growing up because I lived in a rural area, but they just hired a coach. It was from a private company and came and picked
yeah.
us up and dropped us off at school. But it wasn't like a yellow thing with school bus written on it. I found that quite endearing.
Because you thought it would say school bus on it as well.
Yeah, well, I just sort of it was just that's like it's a very American thing to see. Um, and fairly unique. I think Canada probably does it as well, but it was yeah, kind of just quite
Yeah,
cute. I thought.
you're right. Even with watching some American shows, I have sort of been like, oh yeah, they don't have this in the UK. Like, right, this one show was talking about a Letterman's Jacket, which
Yeah.
is, I was just looking at my British friend. I was like, oh yeah, you don't have anything like that in the UK. That's a very US
Yeah.
style, a Letterman's Jacket. He's like, yeah,
Mm.
I guess you're right because I have no idea what that is. So there
Yeah.
are some things that are just very uniquely American, and then you don't realize it until you just go, oh yeah, yeah, that's not in the UK at all. It's not even a thing, not even close.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to one day go back to the US and go like, yeah, that really is a British thing, right? I'm realizing how much blue is used in like in construction. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
but it's like what I mean, like that British blue, like that blue,
Yeah.
bench, or it'll be in the
Oh.
in the housing and everything. And it's like British people really
Yeah.
love to put blue on like
No, you're
like
right. I hadn't really
buildings.
thought about it, but yeah, we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
I'm like, this is just like there's just sort of like distinct things. Again, just I think me always bouncing back and in
Mm.
between, I get to always like just gush over the most British things that people don't think about. Like having the
Yeah.
little glass with the little lines in it. I'm just like it's just such a British thing. You don't see it in the U.S.
Mm.
at all, or
No.
just little things like that.
Yeah, I was here. The thing that stands out to me that I really like is the amount of neon signs, like just used in shop signs,
Yeah.
advertising, all sorts of stuff, and just does. I mean, we do have them in the UK, just not very many, and it's really cool if you ever go down a big downtown street like Granville Street in Vancouver or somewhere like that, and just neon everywhere. It's very strikingly American.
Yeah. What? That's pretty cool, man. Yeah, it's glad to that we're doing this little catch up. Maybe when you go to
Yeah, good to
Canada,
catch up.
yeah, we'll do like a Canadian version.
Oh, definitely. Probably
Yes.
won't be as many differences, but there are definitely some. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is great, man. Yeah. Anyone who I'll put this up on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure people have asked me the question, "How did you get over there?" Like, I'm like, nope, don't need a visa, so don't put that in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
comments, because
Same makes life very easy. I mean, I do need one for Canada, but they're so generous that it's still been very easy to get. I've hardly had to do anything really. I've just filled in a few forms, got a couple of
right, it
certificates,
should
and
be easy for you
away I
to
go.
kind of go over there, right? Or is it not?
So you can, if you're under 30, which I am, you can do a thing called an IEC visa, which is basically like a 2-year visa to live in Canada. And it's all you basically need is a certificate from police saying that you don't have a criminal record,
Mm.
and to fill in a few forms, pay a fee, and submit your fingerprints, and away you go. Really, and I'm waiting for that to get processed at the moment. But once I've got that, I can go anytime in the next year, basically.
Oh, that's nice. It's
Yeah.
not bad at all. Yeah, I figured it'd be easy to get to Canada. Yeah, same. There's also quite a few Canadians who've come over here as well. Right? Yeah, there's
Yeah.
such a British link. A lot of people come over on like an ancestor visa. They're
Yeah.
either their
Okay, that's interesting.
parents, yeah, parents or
Yeah.
grandparents were like born in Scotland, and they're able to come
Mm.
over here and get a visa.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Canadians over there. I've met more Canadians in Britain than I have Americans, actually.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Awesome, man. It was great chatting with you. So I know
Yeah,
I
you
know
too. Nice to
early.
catch up.
Yeah, also the time gap. I'm so used to converting East Coast time that when I'm now starting to
Yeah.
hear the West Coast time, I'm like, oh God, that's about eight
Yeah,
hours.
so it's about 7 p.m. there for you, right?
Yeah, it just hit 7:01. So
Yeah, it's 11 a.m. here for us. So just getting started with my day, really. So after this, I gotta get on with
yeah,
my work, and you get to have an evening.
yeah,
But it's it can be kind of good when I'm doing that because a lot of the time my clients have gone to bed by the time I get to their stuff, so I can sort of be like, right, that's done. I don't need to worry about it till tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. You have that nice, good 8 hour window.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, you take care, man. We'll catch up another time. Maybe
You too.
we'll
Yeah,
do.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice. It's nice hearing from you.
Great. Yeah, great to speak to you.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot.
I'll see you
See you
later.
soon. Bye.
All right. Bye.